When researchers use the phrase, "we cannot fully explain this," they are not admitting defeat. They are doing something far more honest and far more difficult than the confident proclamations that fill most science communication. They are acknowledging that the physical evidence in front of them exceeds the explanatory capacity of the current framework, that the structure or the site or the arrangement of stones is real and measurable and documented, and that the question of who built it, when, why, or by what process is not yet answered to the standard that science requires before it stops asking the question. Australia has an unusual number of those moments, partly because it is ancient, partly because it is vast and still incompletely surveyed, partly because the cultures that built what is here operated within knowledge systems and social structures that Western archaeology spent most of its history refusing to take seriously, which means that the frameworks used to interpret what is found here were developed for different contexts and routinely fail when applied to this continent. Every structure on this list is real. Every debate described here is happening in actual published literature or in genuine scientific and cultural conversation. Some of these structures have probable explanations that are simply not yet confirmed to the evidentiary standard researchers require. Others have been studied for decades and remain genuinely unresolved. None of them require supernatural explanations. All of them require something harder to sustain than belief in the supernatural. They require honest uncertainty. An honest uncertainty, held without flinching, is the beginning of every genuine discovery this continent has ever produced. Number 12. The Wurdi Young stone arrangement and an observatory 11,000 years old. In the paddocks of a property near Little River in Victoria, on the traditional country of the Wathrong people, there is a stone arrangement of approximately 90 basalt rocks laid out in an egg-shaped oval, approximately 50 meters across, with several prominent outlying stones positioned along specific radial lines from the central formation. The arrangement, known as Wurdi Young, was documented by researchers including Dwayne Hemaker at the University of Melbourne and colleagues from the Cultural Heritage Trust, and the publication of their findings in the Australian Journal of Archaeology produced one of the most significant results in the emerging field of cultural astronomy in Australia. When the alignment of the outlying stones was measured against the positions of the setting sun at the summer solstice, the winter solstice, and the equinoxes, the correspondence was precise. The stones marked these solar events with an accuracy that, if deliberate, implies a sustained program of astronomical observation and recording that must have extended over many generations of sky watching before the specific solar positions could have been identified and encoded in stone with this precision. What experts cannot fully explain is the age of the arrangement and the full extent of its function. The basalt rocks sit on a surface whose archaeological context, the soil layers, and associated deposits that would normally allow dating, has been significantly disturbed by more than a century of pastoral activity. The age estimate of up to 11,000 years, discussed in the published literature and in statements by Wathrong elders, is based on indirect evidence, including the state of the rock surfaces and the oral traditions of the community, neither of which provides the kind of absolute date that archaeologists need to make a definitive statement. What is not in question is the alignment itself. The stones point where they point. The sun sets where it sets. The correspondence is real, and it is not accidental. The full explanation of what this arrangement was, how long it took to build, and what social infrastructure of observation and memory it required, remains the subject of ongoing research that has not yet reached its conclusion. Number 11. The Brewarina fish traps and an engineering achievement without a confirmed date. On the Barwon River, in northern New South Wales, on the traditional country of the Njemba people, there is a system of stone fish traps extending across several hundred meters of riverbed that is widely recognized as one of the oldest human constructions on Earth. The traps consist of a network of stone walls, channels, and holding pools arranged to exploit the behavior of fish moving upstream during seasonal floods, directing them into enclosures where they can be harvested efficiently and in large quantities. The engineering is sophisticated. The arrangement of walls and channels reflects a detailed understanding of water flow dynamics, of the seasonal behavior of specific fish species, and of the structural properties of the local stone. Knowledge that could only have been accumulated over a very long period of observation and refinement. The Njemba people have maintained and used these fish traps continuously within living memory, and their oral traditions describe the traps as having been built by ancestral beings in the dreaming, the framework within which the deepest and most ancient knowledge of country is held. What experts cannot explain with precision is the age. Dating stone structures built in riverbed environments is methodologically extremely challenging. Water movement, sediment, deposition, and removal, and the periodic flooding that the traps are designed to exploit all work against the preservation of the datable organic material that would allow a direct age determination. Estimates in the popular and semi-academic literature have ranged from a few thousand to over 40,000 years, and the archaeologists who have examined the site most carefully, including work referenced in publications from the New South Wales Heritage Office, have been consistent in saying that the precise age cannot be established with current methods. What can be said is that the traps are pre-European, that they represent an investment of engineering labor on a scale that implies a substantial and settled population with a social organization to coordinate large-scale construction, and that their continued function as a fish harvesting system over whatever period they have existed makes them one of the most successful pieces of engineering infrastructure in human prehistory. The question of exactly how old they are has not been answered. It may not be answerable with the tools currently available. Number 10. The Murray Man, and a figure that appeared from nowhere on the Jibba Plain near Murray in outback South Australia. In July 1998, a pilot on a routine flight noticed something in the desert below that had not been there before. A geoglyph, a figure drawn into the earth at enormous scale, depicting a man in profile holding a throwing stick or wumara, measuring approximately 4 kilometers from head to feet and visible in its entirety only from the air or from satellite imagery. The Murray Man, as it came to be called, is the largest geoglyph in the world, larger than the Nazca figures of Peru, and its origin has never been definitively established. What experts cannot explain is who made it, when, and how, without leaving any trace of the construction process. The figure was created by removing the surface layer of desert pavement to expose the lighter soil beneath, in a technique requiring either extraordinarily precise GPS navigation or a survey methodology capable of reproducing a coherent human figure at 4-kilometer scale without any positioning technology visible to the outside world. No construction equipment was seen in the area in the period before its discovery. No footprints or vehicle tracks indicating the construction process were found in the immediate vicinity. Several individuals and groups have claimed responsibility over the years, and various theories involving GPS-guided machinery, land art collectives, and American government involvement have been advanced without any being confirmed. The figure has been partially damaged by wind erosion and was partly relined in 2016 by a group that documented their work, but the origin of the original figure remains officially unsolved. Archaeological examination of the figure by researchers from Flinders University found no evidence of Aboriginal origin and no cultural material, consistent with traditional construction methods, which most researchers take as confirmation that the figure is recent rather than ancient, probably created in the 1990s. But by whom? And how a construction of this scale was executed without detection remains a genuine unsolved problem that the available evidence does not resolve. Number 9. The Mundine Cave Formations and the question of what shaped them. In the karst country of Western Australia's southwest, within the network of limestone cave systems that honeycomb the coastal plain south of Perth, researchers examining specific formations within Mundine Cave have identified structural features whose origin is not fully accounted for by the standard processes of speleothem formation. The cave contains the usual extraordinary range of stalactites, stalagmites, flowstone, and hilloctites produced by the slow deposition of calcium carbonate from mineral-rich groundwater. But it also contains zones where the cave walls and ceiling show evidence of scalloping, surface dissolution, and structural modification that researchers from the Geological Survey of Western Australia and the Karst Management Advisory Group have examined without reaching a consensus explanation. Cave modification of this kind can be produced by several processes, including hydrothermal water circulation, condensation, corrosion, and specific patterns of airflow driving differential weathering. What makes certain sections of Mundine's modification patterns difficult to explain is the scale and spatial distribution, which does not match the patterns typically produced by any single one of these processes, and may require a combination of mechanisms operating in a specific sequence, whose precise reconstruction has not been achieved. The cave system also contains archaeological evidence of human use extending back several thousand years, and the Nuingar people, whose country this is, maintain cultural relationships with the cave system that include knowledge of its properties and behavior that researchers working on the cave's geology have found valuable in identifying areas warranting closer examination. The cave is not inexplicable in the sense of defying physical understanding. It is inexplicable, in the more precise sense, that the specific combination of processes that produced its current form has not been reconstructed to the satisfaction of the geologists who have studied it. Number 8. The Standing Stones of New South Wales, and the survey that raised more questions. Across the tablelands and slopes of rural New South Wales, in paddocks and on hilltops, and along ridgelines, there are concentrations of standing or deliberately placed stones that have been known to European observers since the pastoral settlement of the region and that have resisted systematic study until relatively recently. Survey work by researchers associated with the New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service, and by independent researchers including Phil Creaser, who has documented stone arrangements across a wide area of the state, has identified multiple sites where stones appear to have been deliberately positioned in configurations that are not easily explained by natural geological processes, and that in some cases align with astronomical events, landscape features, or each other in ways that suggest intentional placement. The challenge with standing stone sites in New South Wales is compounded by the extent of pastoral disturbance. Over more than 150 years of land use that has moved, buried, and destroyed an unknown proportion of the original configurations. What remains is a fragmentary record of what were, in some cases, substantial and deliberate arrangements whose full extent and function cannot be reconstructed from what survives. For the Aboriginal communities whose country contains these sites, the question of what they were used for is not always one that oral tradition answers in the terms that archaeological research requires. Some sites are associated with specific ceremonial functions known to custodian communities. Others have had their associated knowledge lost or disrupted by the same colonial processes that physically disturbed the stones. What experts cannot explain is the full picture, the original distribution, the construction timeline, and the relationship between the surviving arrangements and the complete systems they were presumably part of. The fragments that remain are consistent with a tradition of deliberate landscape marking as sophisticated as anything found in the contemporaneous archaeological record elsewhere in the world. But the tradition itself can only be partially reconstructed from what survives. Number 7. The Dampier Archipelago, petroglyphs, and the question of the submerged panels. The Murujuga Rock Art Complex of the Dampier Archipelago in Western Australia, which contains more than 1 million individual engravings and represents the largest petroglyph site on Earth, has already appeared in previous discussions of Australian prehistory. What belongs on this list is a specific and unresolved aspect of that site that researchers examining its full extent have identified but not yet explained: the presence of engraved panels on rock surfaces that are currently submerged or in the intertidal zone, at depths and positions that place their creation at a time when sea levels were significantly lower than today. Research by Ken Mulvaney, the rock art specialist, who has conducted the most systematic survey of Murujuga's full extent, has documented engravings on rock surfaces at and below current sea level, whose weathering characteristics and stylistic features are consistent with the oldest phases of the engraving tradition, suggesting they were created when those surfaces were above water, before the post-glacial sea level rise submerged them. If these engravings were created at the dates their weathering and style suggest, they are among the oldest examples of figurative rock art in the world, created on surfaces that were dry land during the last ice age, and that have been underwater for between 7,000 and 12,000 years. What experts cannot fully explain is the complete sequence of creation and submergence for these panels, the precise age of individual engravings, and the relationship between the submerged panels and the extraordinary above-water panels that surround them. The Murujuga complex as a whole is so large and so varied that the resources required to study it systematically have never been fully committed, and the submerged panels in particular represent an archaeological challenge that standard terrestrial survey methods cannot address. Underwater archaeological survey of the Murujuga intertidal zone is in its early stages, and what it will find, when it is conducted at the scale the site deserves, is a question that nobody can yet answer. Number 6. The Bora Grounds of Queensland and the Continental Network, nobody mapped. Across Queensland and into northern New South Wales, in cleared paddocks and beneath regrowth vegetation and on hilltops that command views of the surrounding landscape, there are circular earthworks known as Bora Grounds, ceremonial sites consisting of 1 or 2 rings of raised earth, typically between 15 and 30 meters in diameter, connected in the touring form by a cleared pathway and oriented in specific directions relative to each other and to the broader landscape. The Bora Grounds were the sites of initiation ceremonies central to the social and legal systems of the Aboriginal nations of southeastern Queensland and northern New South Wales, and their construction required substantial organized labor, precise surveying capability, and the coordination of multiple communities over the territory in which the ceremonial network operated. What experts cannot explain is the full extent and age of the network. Surveys conducted by researchers, including the Queensland Museum and the New South Wales Heritage Office, have identified hundreds of surviving Bora Ground sites, but the pastoral and agricultural development of southeastern Queensland has destroyed an unknown number of others, and the original density of the network across the region is not established. More significantly, the geometric and geographic relationships between individual sites, The patterns of orientation, spacing, and alignment that some researchers have identified as potentially encoding astronomical or landscape information across the network as a whole have not been systematically studied at the scale required to test whether those patterns are real or coincidental. The Bora grounds are not unexplained in the sense of being mysterious. Their function as ceremonial sites is known. Their construction method is understood in general terms. What is not explained is the full architecture of the network they formed, the logic governing their placement across the landscape, and the accumulated social and astronomical knowledge that their construction implies. That knowledge existed. Much of it was disrupted by colonial processes before it could be documented. And the physical remains of the network, fragmentary and partially destroyed as they are, do not by themselves reconstruct what has been lost. Number 5. The Kimberley Wandjina figures and the ceremony that maintained the world. In the Kimberley region of Western Australia, on sandstone gallery walls and cave ceilings that have been repainted by successive generations of Aboriginal artists for an unknown but very substantial period of time, there are figures of a type found nowhere else on Earth. The Wandjina figures, depicted with large eyes, a halo-like head surround, and a face without a mouth, represent ancestral creator beings of profound significance in the cosmological traditions of the Wara, Angarenian, and Wanambal peoples. They are not merely art. They are living presences that require periodic repainting to maintain their power and their beneficial relationship with the country and the communities whose responsibility it is to maintain these paintings. Understand the act of repainting not as restoration, but as ceremony, as the renewal of a relationship between the living and the ancestral beings whose presence in the rock is what makes the country function as it should. What experts cannot explain is the depth of the tradition. The Wandjina paintings that are visible today overlie earlier paintings in many locations, and the stratigraphic sequence of paint layers in some galleries extends to depths that researchers, including Ian Crawford, at the Western Australian Museum, and later analysts have found impossible to date precisely but consistent with great antiquity. More fundamentally, what is not explained is the stability of the tradition, the way in which a specific and highly distinctive figurative style has been maintained, with recognizable continuity, across a time span that the available evidence suggests extends to at least 4,000 years, and that the oral traditions of the custodian communities describe in terms that suggest much greater depth. The mechanism by which a figurative tradition is maintained at this level of consistency across hundreds of human generations, the social and ceremonial infrastructure that holds the style in place against the drift that usually transforms artistic traditions over time, is not fully understood and represents one of the genuinely open questions in Australian rock art research. Number 4. The Pilbara spinifex rings and the circles that cover the desert. In satellite imagery of the Pilbara and Gibson Desert regions of Western Australia, the landscape is covered in circular and ring-shaped features of varying diameter, from a few meters to tens of meters across, that in some areas are so numerous and so regular that they give the desert surface the appearance of a vast, disorganized circuit board. Most of these features are spinifex rings, circular grass formations produced by the growth pattern of Triodia species, the spiky grasses that dominate arid Australian landscapes, which grow outward from a central point and die in the center as the plant ages, producing the distinctive ring shape. This biological explanation accounts for the majority of circular features visible in remote sensing imagery. But within and among the spinifex rings, researchers conducting systematic survey of specific areas of the Pilbara have identified circular and semicircular arrangements of stone that do not match the spinifex ring pattern, that are consistent with deliberate construction, and whose function and age are not established. The challenge is separating, in a landscape covered in natural circles, the constructed from the natural, and doing so rigorously enough to make defensible claims about the extent and character of the constructed features. Remote sensing analysis, published by researchers associated with the CSIRO and with Curtin University, has begun developing automated methods for identifying anomalous circular features in Pilbara landscape imagery that might represent constructed rather than natural formations. But the ground truthing required to confirm or refute the candidate sites identified by these methods has been conducted at only a fraction of the locations flagged. The full picture of what exists in the Pilbara beyond the areas that have been systematically surveyed on the ground is genuinely unknown, and the circular features that do not fit the spinifex ring model remain, for the moment, incompletely explained. Number 3. The walls of China at Lake Mungo and the architecture of wind and water. The Lunette Dunes of Lake Mungo in the Willandra Lakes World Heritage Area, known as the Walls of China, are not human constructions. They are natural landforms created by the wind-driven accumulation of sediment eroded from the dry lake bed over thousands of years. But within and around these dunes, Researchers, including Jim Bowler at the University of Melbourne and subsequent teams working the site, have identified structural features whose formation history is more complex than the simple wind and water model accounts for. Specifically, there are zones within the Mungo Lunette where the sediment sequence shows evidence of rapid, large-scale erosion and redeposition events that do not fit the gradual aeolian accumulation model, where the stratigraphy is inverted or disrupted in ways that indicate sudden, high-energy reworking of the landscape, and where the preservation conditions for the ancient human remains and archaeological material found within them imply a burial history more complex than passive sediment accumulation. Bowler's published work on the Mungo sedimentary sequence, which established the dating framework for Mungo Man and Mungo Lady, and is among the most influential contributions to Australian quaternary science, is explicit about the complexity of the depositional history and about the specific events within that history that are not yet fully explained by the available evidence. The walls of China are not ancient structures in the sense of being built, but the forces that shaped them into their current form, and the specific high-energy events within their formation history that created the conditions that preserved a 42,000-year human burial record, are not fully reconstructed. What the wind did, and what the water did, and what the combination of drought and flood and the slow chemistry of sediment did to produce this extraordinary archive of ancient human life on a dried-out lakeshore in the outback, is a story still being read from the evidence, one careful sediment layer at a time. Number 2. The Garnawala rock engravings and the tradition too old to place. In the sandstone country of Arnhem Land, in the Northern Territory, within the cultural landscape of the Jawoyn people, there are rock engravings of a style and technique distinct from the more widely known painted art of the region, pecked and ground into the rock surface in configurations that include both representational figures and abstract geometric forms. The Garnawala engravings and the broader tradition of ground and pecked engraving in Arnhem Land represent a phase of rock art production whose age, function, and relationship to the painted traditions that overlay them, in some locations, has not been established to the satisfaction of the researchers who have examined them. Work by researchers, including Paul Taccone at Griffith University, and colleagues examining the rock art sequences of Arnhem Land has produced a relative chronology, a sequence of styles from oldest to most recent, that places the pecked and ground engraving tradition at the base, below the earliest painted traditions. But the absolute age of that base layer, the number of years before present at which the engraving tradition began, is not established. The geological context does not provide the datable materials that would allow direct age determination, and the surfaces on which the engravings are made do not retain organic residues that could be radiocarbon dated. The age estimates that appear in the literature range from a few thousand years to several tens of thousands of years, a range so large that it encompasses fundamentally different interpretations of what these engravings represent in the human story of the region. What the experts who have studied them cannot explain is where the engraving tradition came from, how it relates to the painted traditions that followed it, and what happened to it, whether it was replaced by painting, whether the practitioners of the two traditions were the same people or different communities, and whether the shift from engraving to painting represents a cultural continuity or a rupture. Number 1. The Bujbim channels that extended beyond the known boundary. The Bujbim cultural landscape of southwestern Victoria, inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List in 2019 and representing the oldest known aquaculture system in the world, has been discussed in previous contexts as a remarkable example of Aboriginal engineering and economic sophistication. What belongs specifically on this list is a finding that emerged from the archaeological survey work conducted in preparation for the World Heritage nomination, and that has not yet been fully resolved. In mapping the extent of the stone channel and weir system at Bujbim, researchers including Heather Bilth, whose doctoral research at Monash University produced the foundational analysis of the system's engineering, and subsequent survey teams, identified segments of stone channel and wall extending beyond the boundaries of the area covered by the original heritage documentation, in directions and at elevations that the hydraulic model developed for the known system does not predict. These extension segments are consistent in construction, technique, and material with the documented channels, and their positions on the landscape suggest they may be parts of a system substantially larger than the one whose extent is currently established. What experts cannot fully explain is where these extensions lead, whether they connect to additional holding pond systems in areas not yet surveyed, whether they represent a different phase of construction, extending the system in directions whose hydraulic logic has not been worked out, or whether they are remnants of a phase of the system that was later modified or abandoned. The Bujbim system is the most documented and most extensively studied example of Aboriginal engineering in Australia. and the finding that its true extent may be larger than currently understood is, in the context of everything this site has already produced, entirely consistent with the pattern of this continent's prehistory. Every time researchers think they have established the boundaries of what was here, the evidence moves the boundary further. The 12 structures on this list cover a span from the genuinely ancient to the possibly recent, from the astronomically aligned to the hydraulically engineered, from the cosmologically significant to the industrially functional. What they share is the specific quality of being real and being present and being not yet fully explained to the standard that the researchers who study them require before they stop asking questions. That standard, the refusal to settle for an explanation that fits most of the evidence, while quietly ignoring the parts that do not fit, is what separates science from the comfortable certainties it is sometimes mistaken for. Australia keeps producing structures and sites and arrangements that meet evidence with more questions. That is not a problem with Australia. That is what makes it the most scientifically interesting landmass on Earth. If that interest lives in you, stay close. The questions are nowhere near finished.